Good morning, everyone, all my old friends in Washington, D.C. It's a very odd experience for me to be sitting in the Vedanta Temple in Los Angeles and giving a lecture to all my friends in Washington, D.C., especially because in our setup I don't have any video of anyone, so it really is a matter of faith here that that this is making it to everyone. But good morning to you. It's with great memories, a warm heart, and a great deal of excitement that I get to be here this morning and again be able to talk about the things that are so deeply loved and so deeply moving, and to feel the heart open and just generally warm to the presence of God and our time together, and being able to try and put into words things that are so much bigger and so much more beautiful than what a word can actually ever convey. As all of you know, it's my tradition to start a lecture with Hafiz, or a poem of some kind. I broadened up at one point. This one is called Becoming Human. Once a man came to me and spoke for hours about his great visions of God that he felt that he was having. He asked me for confirmation, saying, "Are these wondrous dreams true?" I replied, "How many goats do you have?" He looked surprised and said, "I'm speaking of sublime visions, and you ask me about goats?" And I spoke again, saying, "Yes, brother, how many do you have?" "Well, Hafiz, I have 62. And how many wives?" And again he looked surprised and said, "Well, 4. "Well, how many rose bushes in your garden? How many children? Are your parents still alive? Do you feed the birds in winter?" And he answered, "All of these." And then I said, "You asked me if I thought your visions were true. I would say that they were, if they make you become more human, more kind, more loving, more giving to every creature, to every plant that you know." So this morning lecture, I just chose a small topic like the big picture, to talk about the way things are, the way things seem, or maybe a combination of the two. Mrs. Bell, or Miss Bell, I guess, as she's recorded in the complete works with Swami Vivekananda, is having a conversation. They're having a class, actually, and this is from her notes. And at one point, they're talking about the nature of the world. And Miss Bell says, "This world is an old schoolhouse where we come to learn our lessons." Swami Vivekananda: "Who told you that?" Miss Bell could not remember. "Well, I don't think so. I think this world is a circus ring in which we are clowns tumbling." Miss Bell: "Well, why do we tumble, Swami?" Vivekananda: "Because we like to tumble. When we get tired, we'll quit." This is an age-old question and a fun way of beginning to talk about it. I always, when I approach scripture or approach spiritual study, I always first try to imagine myself in a pristine world without any opinions or ideas or lessons at all, taking it all the way back, maybe being, if you want to be that way about it, perhaps like a monkey sitting way back in the first tree as I've, evolved into that moment. There's no churches, there's no wise men, there's no sages, there's no scriptures, there's no one to tell me like it is. And I'm sitting there wondering, wow, what next? I would imagine that I'd be quite amazed at the level of sophistication in the tools that I have, my eyes that can see at such a beautiful resolution with so much color, effortlessly, always available to me, my ears, which can hear these beautiful sounds, my hands, which can touch things and grab things, and a will that can build. And I can imagine sitting there and kind of coming to know all of this possibility and wondering, what? Why am I here? Any of you gamers from the 90s will remember a game called Myst. And it was a fantastic game, a mystery. And the thing that makes it relevant this morning is the fact that in Myst, the game starts and you don't know what you're supposed to do. You just are planted as a character on an island. And so those first moments of the game, you're just wandering and just looking, just taking it in and trying to figure out what's going on. And little by little, you pick up a clue here, a little puzzle gets solved over here, and this vista begins to open as to what your real purpose is, what needs to be done, what the story was that brought you to this place. And you play the game accordingly, growing in your knowledge and understanding each step of the way. And when I hear this conversation with Miss Bell and Vivekananda, I'm charmed by it, because in one way, we fall into this world and we're in the same condition. We have no idea. Well, what's up? What's right? What's wrong? What's true? We have hunches about all these things, and at moments of, I guess, great insight or purity, the truth of these things come out. But in general, we don't have any idea. We really can't begin to process the magnitude of this experience of life. And immediately Vivekananda gives us a great reassurance. He says, you're just a clown tumbling. It's a beautiful way of saying, sit down, relax, enjoy yourself, look at this life, open yourself to it, see what it is, let it be what it is. If it was a schoolroom in which we had a lesson, then we would have to assume all kinds of things, and we don't have the faculty for doing that. How can we assume the mind of this experience? How can we place a purpose over such a vastness? How can we collect an infinite number of variables and determine that it's for something in particular? So Swamiji gives you a great deal of permission here, a permission to tumble, to play, to learn, to become aware, to look closely. Let nothing be taken for granted in your daily experience. Watch and see, and let it unfold for you a story like your life, a story of love, a story that's understood through intelligence, the story of existence. When we get tired, we stop. Until then, we go forward. But how do we figure it out? How do we know? In his writing called Jnana and Karma, Swami Vivekananda says, the universe equals a phenomena of one universal being. Okay, so the universe in its entirety and probably beyond is one infinite universal being. He, or that, seen through our senses, is the universe. Now, there's a wonderful idea. So this world that we're experiencing, this universe that we're seeing, that we seem to inhabit, he's suggesting there's something behind it. How? By letting us know that we've only got 5 senses to take in all of the information that we have. 5. You can count it on one hand. All of the information you're able to get from this universe comes through 5 senses, 5 pieces of information. And your mind does the best it can. It takes those 5 pieces of information and tries to assemble an infinite puzzle. And its best representation is the world that you live in, this place now, this here and now. This is the divine seen through your senses. We call it Maya. Why? It's a nice word for it. It's incomplete. It doesn't always make sense. We can't fully understand it or grasp it, and certainly it puzzles us more than it enlightens us, it seems. So the world is an illusion. Not an illusion of nothingness or created from nothingness, but an illusion created by a partial picture of a much greater whole that 5 senses isn't enough to reach, and compiled in a mind that isn't large enough to hold an infinity. And so what we come up with is this makeshift creation called Maya. And we do the best we can, waking up in the morning and realizing, oh, this body that's either me or somehow attached to me is hungry. Oh, look, it's dirty. Oh, look, it needs to wake up. It needs some coffee. All of these things we go through, and we start the day one more time after how many before it. So this is Maya, this world, an illusion. That is the imperfect vision of the real, according to Swamiji's words. A semi-revelation, even as the sun in the morning is a red ball. Thus all evils and all wickednesses are but weakness, the imperfect vision of goodness. There's a fascinating idea. This notion that all of the evils, all of the shortcomings, all of the wickedness in this world really exists only because we have an imperfect vision of the whole. We can't see all of the pieces of information that we need for that world to resolve into perfection, to resolve into goodness, into oneness. So we think, oh, well, let's go out and find some more information. Let's find ways of getting more information into our minds so that we can figure this out, so that we can find out about this world that we live in. Swamiji says, well, wait, not so fast. In Jnana Yoga, he says, no amount of knowledge of the external world can solve the problem. But wait, says the scientist, we're just beginning to know a little. Wait a few thousand years and we'll get the solution to you. No, says the Vedantist, for he has proved beyond all doubt that mind is limited, that it cannot go beyond certain limits, beyond time, beyond space, or beyond causation. As no man can jump out of his own self, so no man can go beyond the limits that have been put upon him by the laws of time and space. So you see, the fact is, the tool that we're using an old computer, as it were, trying to play a game that's a little too advanced for it. We have a set of limitations that we carry with us, time, space, and causation. We talk about those quite frequently. They're one of my favorite topics, actually, because they don't exist. They aren't real. They're part of the tool that you're using to compile your five senses into a greater picture. Time, space, and causation are conceptual. Sri Nisargadatta says there's no such thing as causation, that everything that you call causation is merely repetition, and you've made a law out of it. Vivekananda says here, every attempt to solve the laws of causation, time, and space would be futile. Why? Because the very attempt would have to be made by taking for granted the existence of all three of them. Because your mind, the tool that you're using to think and to reason and to compile this picture of the divine, has built into it some limitations. Time, space, and causation. Three things that you've imagined. That imagined past that I mention all the time, that doesn't exist. This projected future that we're running after all the time, that doesn't exist. As far as the truth here and a now, and your mind has taken that here and now and broken it into 5 pieces, and then laid it out according to time, space, and causation, because that's what it does. The mind lays it out in front of it, it notices the differences, it catalogs those differences, and then it notices the relationships between these disparate objects that it has broken the one into. So you see, the reason we can't see that this universe is one without a second, that we're not small component parts of it running around in the end, but that there's one without a second. We can't tell from the perspective of the mind, because the very first thing we have to do to even perceive this divine existence is break it into 5 pieces. So even before you get to think about it, your mind has handed you 5 broken pieces of what was a singularity, a oneness, and now has left you to construct a puzzle to try and put back together a wholeness when you don't have all the pieces? You've only got 5. The Vedanta says the mind is limited, that it cannot go beyond certain limits. Every attempt to solve the laws of causation, time, and space will be futile because the mind will impose them. What does the statement of the existence of the world mean then? This world has no existence, Swamiji says. What's meant by that? It means that it has no absolute existence. It exists only in relation to your mind. It's only you taking these disparate pieces of information and drawing relationships not only between the pieces, but more importantly, between the pieces and you. How does all of this relate to you? We are all the center of our own world, which is part of our problem. Right? Everything we see, taste, touch, hear, and smell, we relate to ourselves. We come up with ideas around it. We construct a personal reality. And all of us walk around in a little bubble of personal reality, bumping into each other, trying to understand each other, trying to see clearly what each other is. But all of that we've learned is related to something that isn't true. An ego self that's separate and apart from everything else. So you see, we live on the wrong side of mind. We live in the mind. We've subjected our definition of ourself as being part of time, space, and causation. We've identified ourself as being a component of 5 pieces, addled together, cobbled together into this personality, this personhood. And if we take that to be ourselves, if we take that to be the truth about what we are, we're going to play the game in a certain way that doesn't solve the puzzles. We're going to play a game that's somewhere around 40 years old or 45 years old. You're going to walk around, you're going to suddenly sit down, and this great mood is going to come over you. Is this it? This is it. I've played the game according to the rules. I went to college. I got a good job. I found someone to marry. I got a house. I have my requisite 2.5 kids. We've paid all of our bills. We've gotten all the things that we thought we needed in the world. I'm providing for people. I'm even going to church, or doing some meditation. And yet, really? This is it? And then I die? What's the point of anything? You come to realize that this world has no absolute existence. And by insisting on your own separateness from it, that emptiness settles in, and you wonder what to do. You see, it has only an existence in relation to your mind and to the mind of everyone else. We see this world with the 5 senses, but if we had another sense, we would see it in something more. If we had yet another sense, it would appear as something still different. It has, therefore, no real existence. It has no unchangeable, immovable, infinite existence, nor can it be called non-existence, seeing that it's obviously existing somehow. And we slave to work in and through it. It is a mixture of existence and non-existence. So in this meaningless world that doesn't have any absolute existence, whose nature can't really be plumbed from the broken clues that were given, what's the point of anything? Swamiji asks the question, why should a man be moral or pure? Why should we care? Why should we just go out, check out? That big statement from the 60s. Just check out, just quit, give up. Why isn't that the way to go? He says a man should be moral and pure because this will strengthen his will. Everything that strengthens the will by revealing the real nature is moral. Everything that does the reverse is immoral. Man must recover from his state of slavery to laws, to words, and so on. What are these laws and words and so on? These are all of the things that we've concocted in our mind from the 5 incomplete pieces of information, broken up from its original state of being a whole. And in dealing with them, we have to be truthful. We have to be giving. We have to be unselfish. We have to be moral. We have to have values. And we have to strengthen those values and make sure that those values align with our thoughts and our words and our deeds. Why? Because this is preparing the instrument. You see, we've already spoken about having an imperfect instrument, a mind that already is dealing with broken pieces through 5 senses. We're already dealing with a mind that comes with constraints of time, space, and causation. How can we, if we are this broken, incomplete tool, ever find the truth or have a knowledge of it? Vivekananda's here is saying, hold yourself together, be true to yourself, be full of integrity, treat others as oneness, treat others as the same as you, that golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. He says that if you do this, it will strengthen your character. It will fix your tool, as it were. It will repair some of the missing pieces for you. Man must recover from this state of slavery that this mind has created for us. Slaves to what? Pretty much everything. I remember that morning when I woke up one day and I was kind of going through a little rah-rah session for myself to get the day started. And I was saying, you're free. You're absolutely free. You can do anything you want. You can be, the whole world is yours. And then I heard myself say that, you can do anything you want. And I thought, who is it that wants? What is it that decides that something is wanted? When I get hungry, it's the body wanting. When I get lonely, that's the mind wanting. What about me? What is the want that I have? And I realized that if there was one, my notion of freedom was gone, because I was serving a desire, serving a need, serving a want. Vivekananda says we have to recover from this idea of laws, this idea of words, which break everything into even smaller pieces, sentences with the syntax that creates the relationships that the mind understands, but perpetuates a lie about things, perpetuates the lie of brokenness, the lie of separateness, the lie of relational integration, the lie of anything being outside of yourself. He says we have no freedom of the will now. Without that morality, without that strength of character, you're a slave to everything the mind thinks or makes up as a need or a want, a desire. You're running around with a big hook in your nose, thinking that you're following your own desire, but forgetting that you didn't always have a body. And certainly the body that you have now is not the body you had 25 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. For some of you, that's a head-reeling idea. You know, this body has changed so much. How can it be what I am? This mind, my Lord, it's changed uncountable times since I got up this morning. How can it define anything that I want? He says we have no freedom, but we shall have it when we are free. When we are free from our will. He says renunciation is this giving up of the world. Through the senses, anger comes, sorrow comes. As long as renunciation is not there, self and the passion animating it are different. Did you hear that? That's a beautiful clue right there, a very subtle one. As long as renunciation is there. Now, what is this renunciation? This renunciation is saying, no, I'm the observer of all these things. I'm the observer even of the mind that has its limitations. So those limitations don't belong to me. I'm observing a body that's full of limitations, can only be in one place at a time, has to get up and do an incredible amount of work to go from here to there. A thing that constantly needs fuel and emptying and cleaning and perfuming and washing and dressing and resting, all of these things. But I'm the one watching all of this, seeing all of this happen. And by developing that sense of observation, that sense of seeing the whole, and through living that moral and upright life, following and disciplining ourselves, not letting it just run after every single demand that the body and mind has or makes up in the moment, but being still and clear and being established inside as an observer of a great puzzle. Just like when you play Myst, you sit there. You don't forget that you're a human being. Even though it's the computer doing everything and you're just interfacing with that game, pushing buttons, moving your mouse, hitting joysticks, whatever it is, those are not you, and it would be absurd to think that the machine was you. Although when you're engaged deeply in that play, that's the sensation. This is where I am. This is what I am. I am this sage in this game casting spells. I am this detective trying to figure out. And yet we see the absurdity of believing that. We believe it for the moment because why? We're playing the game. Vivekananda says it's the exact same thing now. This mind, this body, they're your computer and tool for playing this game. You're just tumbling. You're just enjoying yourself. You're enjoying this implied oneness without even knowing it. You're searching for it. You don't quite know that that's what you're searching for because you remember it. You remember immortality, and so you're searching for things that can make someone immortal. You remember perfection, so you're searching for ways to become perfect. You remember being universal, and so you're searching for ways of universal. You remember being all-powerful, so you're searching for security. You're searching for strength in this game. But if you believe that the computer is you, if you can believe that this world is you, you won't find those things here. There is no immortality here. There is no universality here. There is no oneness here. There is no infinity here. Those are you. Those are what you bring to the computer. Those are what you brought into this world with you. Through renunciation, the separating yourself out from all of the illusion, from the impartial vision of the whole, by separating yourself out, by following those ideals of morality and ideals of value, by being a man and woman of integrity, letting your yeses be yes and your nos no, you bring around an internal alignment that brings clarity. You begin to understand the limitations of the world you're inhabiting, the world that you've created. You begin to see the errors that you made in relating it to this and calling it yourself. And slowly, slowly you undo these very tight harnesses that line you up in these assumed relationships with the world around you. Very soon you begin to undo them, and the sense of freedom begins to build in you, a taste for that immortality and for that wonder of being free. He says as long as this renunciation isn't there, as long as this separation from the apparent isn't there, he says that you're a slave. And he says as long as you're a slave and this renunciation is not there, that self and the passion animating it are different. So this self, this new you that's slowly becoming apparent, a you that is above and beyond a body, above and beyond a mind, a you, a sense of you that can see a mind and understand its weaknesses, see it and observe an untruth that the mind itself could not see and could not understand and could not escape. You somehow are able to do that because you are not the mind. You're at the edge of mind, watching it all as a vista. And as long as you believe yourself to be a part of the mind, as long as you believe the mind to be you and this world to be related to you, to this body and this point of reference, as long as you believe that, the passion is going to animate you. The desire is going to animate you. And you're going to run collecting things that expire and experiences that are over almost as fast as they happen. And you're going to be on a treadmill that doesn't end because everything you collect disappears and has to be collected again. And over and over and over until hopefully one day, somewhere around midlife, you wake up and think, really? Really? Is this all there is? He says, at last they become identified. If you live long enough serving your passions, chasing after your desires, obeying the needs of your body and mind, eventually you're going to be completely identified with them. They are going to be you. And that's going to be great misery. He says, at last they become identified, and the man is an animal at once. You no longer have that knowledge of your divinity, that knowledge of your infinity, that knowledge of your freedom. And you've become chained to your instincts, to the needs, the primal needs of your body. And you become a man eternally hungry, always needing something to sustain the ego, to sustain the body, to sustain a mood. And more desperate it becomes, because as you become a connoisseur of things in the world, regular things don't do anymore. Now you need the best of the best. Now you need the newest of the new, the most unique of the unique. And your quest becomes more intense and more feverish and more fervent because the things that you need to fill that desire become rarer and rarer and rarer. And then one day you look down and you see that this body that you've cherished so much, that has managed to hook so many partners of pleasure for you, that has managed to run to so many beautiful mountaintops, that has been able to travel the world and party the nights, suddenly you realize that body can barely get you out of bed in the morning. You look down and you can almost not even accept that what you see in the mirror is your own self, let alone think that it's going to go out and be appealing to anyone else in the world. You see the condition and why it's important for spiritual life. You see the condition of why it's important to be aware, to pay attention to your life, so that you don't harden into one of these desperate black holes of need and hunger by the time you're reaching a period in your life when you can be the most beautiful grandfather, the most giving grandmother, the most loving person whose only purpose is to love and to compare and to care. So this renunciation of the mind, how does it come? He tells a personal experience, Vivekananda here. He says, in a desert, when I was thirsty, I saw a lake. It was in the midst of a beautiful landscape. There were trees surrounding it, and their reflections could be seen in the water upside down. But the whole thing proved to be a mirage. Then I knew that every day for a month I had seen this, and only that day, being thirsty, I had learned it to be unreal. Every day for a month I should see it again, but I should never take it to be real. So when we reach God, the idea of the universe, the body, and so on, will vanish. You see what he's making you a promise thereof, is that the unreality of this world will become apparent to you. And you won't look at non-existent things as a means of filling your hunger anymore, because you will realize that it was stupid to begin with. That the world teaches you always, yes, you can have this drink of water, and yes, you'll be back in 2 hours for another one. Yes, you can make your bed this morning, and in 24 hours you will do it again. Yes, you can go and have a great time at that club, and in 7 days you will do it again. And your life will become just a circular repetition of meaningless motion, a distraction, a constant distraction that has slowly become necessary because of the emptiness that you feel deep inside behind it, but can't look at, for fear that you don't have a solution, for fear that there is nothing that can fill you, for fear that there is not a way to find happiness and joy and a lasting bliss in being. He says, understand that this is a mirage. This is just a symbol of something greater. This is just a symbol of something that is infinitely desirable, infinitely wonderful, and infinitely fulfilling. But it isn't what the senses are feeding you, and it's not what the mind is telling you. All of these untruths, all of this emptiness of the world, all of its lies and its unfulfilled promises will vanish in a moment when you at once touch something that the mind will not be able to hold. Know that your soul is sitting in a chariot. The body is that chariot. The outer senses are the horses, and the mind is the reins. The intellect is the charioteer. So man crosses this ocean of Maya. You cross this ocean of Maya. What is Maya? Maya is the universe. Remember, that's just the word we're going to put on what we see to describe it. Since we can't really describe it, if you start describing it, it changes before you finish your sentence. So he says, you take this chariot, use this body, use this mind. Know that it's not you. You're riding it through an experience. He says, when a man is under the control of his senses, he is of this world. You're part and parcel of this broken, incomplete, temporary, constantly changing thing. You won't be able to find that infinite bliss. You won't be able to find that freedom that you're longing for. He says you have to learn to live as a lotus leaf, living in the water and yet untouched by it. So should the soul be in this world. This is a battlefield, he says. Fight your way out. Life in this world is an attempt to see God. Make your life a manifestation of will, strengthened by renunciation. This is how the imperfection is overcome. This is how the ignorance is evaporated. This is how we become aware of that which has had the sages talking for tens of thousands of years. This is how we touch that knowledge that created a Jesus, a Buddha, a Rama, a Ramakrishna, a Holy Mother. Strengthen. He says, make your life an attempt to see the divine. That's why you're here. That's the big picture. Figure out why you're here. Well, why are you here? You're here to see yourself, this infinite oneness, this thing unbroken by senses and unmisinterpreted by the mind. Is that a double negative? Unmisinterpreted. That's why you're here, to touch something glorious, to touch something grand, to touch something that will annihilate this smallness in a single breath. He says it's going to happen. When you live your life as a manifestation of will strengthened by renunciation, he says you're going to learn to control all of your brain centers consciously. He's going to break into 3 steps for us now. He says the first step to doing this is the joy of living. Cool. What a great place to start. He says the first step is the joy of living. Asceticism is fiendish. To laugh is better than to pray. Sing. Get rid of misery. Do not, for heaven's sake, infect others with it. Never think God sells a little happiness and a little unhappiness. Surround yourself with flowers and pictures and incense. The saints went to the mountaintops to enjoy nature. Learn to live. Wake up from your slavery to laws and words, responsibilities, stories, limitations of mood and body. Start to live, which means become aware, which means practice this renunciation and separateness from body-mind so that you can see objectively. See the whole. Look for God hiding behind the incomplete everywhere. Find that isness that ties these disparate moments together. Find that isness in yourself that allows you to know that it's you in different moods, in different weights, in different clothes, in different levels of education, in different levels of physical development. What is it that has tied all of this into a unity? What is it that has made you you? Learn to touch that place, find that place, define that place through renunciation, self-control, and very careful awareness. Turn off the interpreter and see things as they are. Come out of the house, this box that you've lived in, this box of habits, this box of circular activities, this box of distractions that have lied to you for so long that you're afraid to see yourself without them. Come to that self. We must learn to control our brain centers consciously. The first step, the joy of living. And his instructions here are beautiful. Surround yourself with flowers, with pictures and incense. Become worshipful in this world. See see beyond the assumptions that you make. This world will always place you on your knees when you begin to see it again for the first time. This world will always bring you to the deepest of worships when you see it as it is for the first time. In the book of Micah, in the Old Testament of the Christian scriptures, and the Old Testament being the Jewish scriptures, the sage says, "And what does the Lord require of you, this God that you're searching for? Just that you act justly, be fair, love mercy, love to be kind, love to be nurturing, love to be giving, love to be serving, and to walk humbly with your God, with your highest ideal of love, with the greatest imagination that you can possibly come up with. We'll call that God. Because what can you ever know as this small thing with only 5 pieces of information? What can you ever know about the divine? What could you ever mean by the word God? What could you ever think that you're conveying by that 3-letter word? Open it, dive into it, find it, act justly, love mercy, be a person of integrity, be a person of deep love, be a person of beauty and light, surrounding yourself with flowers, decorating the bathroom, making it all grand and glorious. Live beautifully. That's your first assignment. Live with awareness. Don't take the second hand. See life as it is. In Ecclesiastes 12:13, it's another book in the Old Testament. It's a good one to read, actually. This one, I think it's King Solomon. He undertakes exactly what you do when you start mist. He just starts experimenting with life. He incidentally was one of the richest, most powerful kings in history, according to the stories anyway. And he used that money to investigate what is the meaning of life. And in the book of Ecclesiastes, he outlines each of his experiments and where it ended and where it brought him. And in the end, the very last of the last chapter, he says, the sum of the matter, when everything has been said and done, revere God, revere your highest ideal of love and intelligence, and observe the commandments. Observe the manifestation of those highest ideals. Observe the manifestation of love and intelligence, loving mercy, fairness, and humility. This applies to all mankind. That's the sum total. You're here to see the highest manifestation of love, existence, beauty. You're here to be inundated by the depth and wonder. You're here to be free from a desire which dictates what you do next, free from need, which takes the hook out of your nose that's dragging you across the gravel of constant want in this world. The big picture. This world is beautiful and divine. Anything wrong with it that you see is because you haven't gotten all the pieces together. Separate yourself from that ignorance and know the truth. He says the second step is purity. In the list of qualities conducive to purity, he says, as given by Ramanuja, they are enumerated as this: truthfulness, telling the truth, telling things as they are, not as you need or want them to be. See it as it is. You know, in truthfulness, we a lot of times just think that just means just being honest with others, you know, just being straightforward, answering questions with facts. But truth is so much deeper than that. Truth is required between you and your mind, between you and your body. Will you let your mind tell you the truth? There was a time in my life in the late 90s, I've told this story before, where I woke up in the middle of the night. I was struggling with depression at the time, and I woke up in the middle of the night and I was really feeling that downness, that aloneness, you know, sleeping there in my bed. And I sat up and I just was thinking, confused, how can I be unhappy? I've played the game perfectly. I went to college. I slaved through a degree that I hated just because it was practical, because it would pay the bills. I got my job. I got my promotions. I had my house. I had my car. I had my TV, my stereo, my furniture. I had my friends. I had my vacations. I was a yuppie tech worker in the biggest internet bubble in the world in San Francisco, California. And in the midst of all of that, I sat in a bed alone and sad, feeling unfulfilled. And looking around, what did I see? Those of you who remember me telling the story will remember. I saw that my television had grown from a 10-inch black and white one in my dorm room to now a 32-inch Sony Trinitron, which was the biggest tube television you could carry in those days. My stereo had turned from a little jam box sitting on the floor to now these 5-foot-high MB Quart speakers and, you know, all the blah, blah, blahs of the audiophile world. My little twin futon that I used to drag onto the floor at night had now become this nice big queen-size bed. My one room off of a garage had now become a house. My little scooter that I went back and forth with had now become a car. And I understood that I didn't own anything more than I had owned in college. It had just gotten bigger. And I thought about that for a minute. I thought, my God, as my life goes on, things are just going to keep getting bigger. But I'm not. I'm not happier. That growth from 10 inches to 32 inches in my television, it didn't increase my enjoyment of television watching at all. It didn't increase anything. All of the growth that had happened in the material world around me had not produced any growth in me. I was not happier. As a matter of fact, I was a little bit more desperate because I had played by the rules, because I had done what I was supposed to do, and I had not gotten what I was expecting to get. I was not content, and I was even a little bit closer to being content than I was when I started that journey. Now, why do I bring that up in a talk about honesty? I'll bring that up in a talk about honesty because that was really a difficult conversation to have with myself. When I sat there and had to be honest that all the choices I had made had led me nowhere. And then beyond that, to admit that I didn't know what to do next. I didn't know what to do next. And I can tell you that's a terrifying moment when you realize that all you've invested in brought you nothing and you don't have a plan B. You don't know what to do. What I did at that time was within 2 weeks, I sold everything and caught a plane to Prague to become an expatriate writer, because my only response in not knowing was to say, okay, I give you permission, self, to do whatever you think you need to do to find something lasting, some inner peace, some tranquility of existence. Anything you think you need, whatever occurs to you, it's yours. This is our quest now. Now, of course, being an expatriate writer in Prague was also not the answer. It only took me a few months to see that. And Prague wasn't the new place. It took me a few months to see that. So I began wandering around the world, and that story gets long, but it ends here. It ends here in a monastery, where I get to think about this world being a symbol of a divinity that exists deep within the heart of every man, woman, and child. I get to touch something that's infinite in its beauty and its inspiration. I get to practice love, my favorite thing in the world, to be loved. It's the highest sensation I've ever experienced, and to give love, equally as high. To search out this world and find that it's a symbol of love, to look at every life in this world and understand it's a story of love. Every decision you've made in your mind through your life has been for love. It's up to you and your discernment to figure out what it is that you love, what it is in every action that you're doing that you love, and to hone in on that idea, to question it, to poke at it, to be honest with it, to discern. Then you'll approach purity, truthfulness, sincerity, doing things with the whole heart, not reserving a space that's not going to go along for the ride, doing good to others without any gain to oneself, not injuring others by thought or by word or deed. So these are all part of that second step, this purity of mind. You need all of these things because each one of them is going to snap a little string of untruth, a little string of ignorance in relationship that you've drawn between this false self and the world around you. It is only through this kind of practice of morality and purity and perfection that you begin to snap those strings so that you can pull free, you can pull out of mind, you can pull out of body, and you can experience for the first time freedom, beauty, tranquility. Not injuring others by thought. That's a tough one, especially if you're driving. By word or deed. Not coveting others' goods. Not thinking vain thoughts. Not getting caught in your head and just spinning out on ideas about yourself or about the world or about pleasure. Don't waste your time with these things. And not brooding over all the injuries that this world has given you. Not brooding over all of your injuries of the difficult life that you've experienced. This is the second step after learning how to live fully. The third step, he says, is the full training of the mind. This is when we're getting subtle and serious. Reason out what is true from what is untrue. And how do we know? Sri Ramakrishna says, that which is changing is unreal. That which is changing is unreal. That which is unchanging alone is the absolute. You won't be able to see the unchanging because it won't catch your eye. You won't be able to bring it into mind because it's not an object. You won't be able to understand it because it's not part of time, space, and causation. You won't be able to grab it because it is you. You won't be able to see it because it's your own face. That unchanging self which has been the I of your entire life. Not the I this way, but the I, capital me. That which has not changed, though your body, education, and all mind has changed. If for a moment you think you are not God, great terror will seize you. See that God alone is true. As soon as you think I am He, great peace and joy will come to you. Control the senses. If a man curses me, I should see in him God. And through my weakness I see, sorry, I'm reading this all wrong. If a man curses me, I should still see in him God. whom through my weakness I saw as a curser. The poor man to whom you do good is extending privilege to you. He allows you through his mercy to worship him thus by serving him, by doing good to him. You see, so he fills out this third part here. Begin to understand what's really going on. This is a story. This is a symbol of the divine. You live in your own mind. And in that mind, everything being a symbol of this divine love, of this divine purity, of this divine existence, is there for you to worship, to throw your own manifestation into, and see that it is God everywhere. Fill in the missing pieces that your senses were not able to bring to you, those parts of you that explained evil and showed you that it was really just the flip side of good, seen from a wrong perspective, seen from a particular perspective, a perspective that can't see two sides of a coin simultaneously. But your nature is to be able to see it all simultaneously. The history of the world is the history of a few men who had faith in themselves. That faith calls out the divinity within. You can do anything. You fail only when you do not strive sufficiently to manifest infinite power. So what's he saying here? This brings into mind this idea of a bar of completion. Okay, so you've got one bar in front of you, a line. This is realization. This is you living truly as God. This is you not doing anything, not trying at all. We'll color the first part green. That's the part where you're doing the part that you do, the part that you're working on. Now we're going to hit a little yellow part here, and this yellow part is the part that you could do when you're doing your very best, but it's the part you're not doing when you're not doing your very best. That little yellow part in there is where you suffer. That's where your misery is. And then this end of the yellow, there's still this little portion of red over here that even the yellow can't reach. And what is that? That's grace. That's the part that the divine has said, I'll cover for you. You do your best, and I'll take you to the goal. So you've got this bar, this faith, this believing in that grace, in that divine quality of love, in that divine wholeness, that you are infinite, immortal, ever free, ever pure. And what is that faith? It's knowing these things that you know that the world has not taught you. It's knowing your immortality. Because there's nothing in this world that could have taught us about immortality. There's not a single example of it anywhere, and yet you know it. You understand it. Why? Have faith. It's because you brought it with you. Infinity. We can't understand infinity from this world. There's nothing. Even space is limited, they say. We know really big, but we don't know infinite. And yet we're very comfortable with infinite. Yes, infinite. Why? Faith. You brought it in with you. It exists even though you don't have an example of it. It is true even though you can't see it anywhere. That is faith in yourself. Faith that you brought the best of these ideals into the world with you. They are you. That's the ultimate understanding, the ultimate realization. A few good men who had faith in themselves, the faith that calls out this inner divinity. You can do anything. You fail only when you do not strive sufficiently to manifest infinite power. Vivekananda in volume 5 of the Complete Works gives a single sentence that is profound in its meaning. You cannot believe in God until you believe in yourself. You are that, ever free and ever pure. Your life is infinitely important. This world is your playroom to manifest your story of love. If you do it with clarity, if you do it without getting entangled in the story itself, if you do it with purity of heart, with discipline, not to get stuck, not to get confused with your tools, but to remain your infinite pure self. This world is a mansion of mirth, Ramakrishna says. It is the highest dream and manifestation. It's a world worthy of the gods, a beauty that can't be plumbed. And it's yours. I want to end with another poem by Hafiz, where he talks about this. In need of the breath. My heart is an unset jewel upon the tender night, yearning for its dear old friend, the moon. When the nameless one debuts again, 10,000 facets of my being unfurl wings and reveal such a radiance inside, I enter a realm divine. I too begin to sweetly cast light like a lamp through the streets of this world. My heart is an unset jewel upon existence, waiting for the friend's touch. Tonight, my heart is an unset ruby, offered bowed and weeping to the sky. I am dying in these cold hours for the resplendent glance of God. I am dying because of a divine remembrance of who I really am. Hafiz, tonight your soul is a brilliant reed instrument in need of the breath of the Christ. Open your eyes. See this world as it is in this pure and perfect moment. Breathe deeply of your freedom that exists even if you don't know it and experience it. Drink deep of a pure love that has no conditions, even though it's difficult to believe and even more difficult to understand. Bow and worship this manifestation of your highest dream, your highest imagination, your highest ideal, God, and be free.